Beneath the creaking timbers of a merchant vessel, a young woman's desperate pleas echo through the darkness. Chained like cargo in the ship's belly, her worth measured in coins, her humanity denied by cruel men who see her as nothing more than merchandise. When her cries become too bothersome, the captain makes a fatal mistake. He orders her cast into the depths of the storm-racked sea. But the ocean holds secrets older than mankind's earliest memories, ancient powers that slumber in the crushing depths. And sometimes they wake up. When dawn breaks over the blood-red horizon, she returns, not as the trembling girl they drowned, but as something else entirely. Her eyes now burn like twin flames in the morning mist. What ancient force has claimed her soul, and what price will her tormentors pay? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pearl necklace caught the morning light as Mira worked, its soft gleam, a comfort as familiar as her father's weathered hands. 3 generations of healers had worn it. Her grandmother, her mother, and now her. Each pearl held memories of lives saved and lost, of wisdom passed down through gentle touches and whispered remedies. The sea provides, her father always said, grinding dried seaweed into powder for his medicines. The same sea that had given her mother the pearls, one by one, over years of patient diving. The same sea that had taken her mother back, leaving only the necklace and lessons unfinished. Mira's fingers worked steadily, wrapping a fisherman's gashed palm in strips of clean linen. Salt-soaked poultices were her specialty, though the village elders still whispered that she was too young to be trusted with their more serious ailments. At 17, she knew more about healing than many twice her age, but tradition held firm in their small coastal community. "Thank you, young mistress," the fisherman mumbled, avoiding her eyes. They all did that lately, looked away, spoke softly, hurried past. Something had changed in the past month, since the merchant ships had begun anchoring in their protected cove. The village had always welcomed trade, but these vessels were different. Their crews never mingled with the locals, and their captains spoke only with Elder Marcus behind closed doors. Their holds were always full, arriving and departing, though no one ever saw what goods they carried. That evening, as Mira stored her herbs and checked her drying racks of seaweed, quick footsteps approached her door. A child's voice, breathless, with urgency. "Mistress Mira, come quick, it's old Willem." She grabbed her medicine bag, fingers brushing the pearls at her throat for luck. Willem was the village's best rope maker, his hands gnarled but sure after 40 years of craft. She found him collapsed in his workshop, chest heaving, face grey. "Heart seized again," his wife explained, wringing her apron. "Been working too, hard, filling that big order for the merchants." Mira worked through the night, applying compresses and administering her father's strongest medicines. By dawn, Willem's breathing had steadied, colour returning to his cheeks. She dozed in a chair. By his bedside, pearl necklace twisted anxiously between her fingers. A heavy knock startled her awake. Elder Marcus stood in the doorway, his usual benign smile somehow wrong in the early light. Behind him loomed 3 figures in dark merchant clothes, their eyes calculating and cold. "My dear," Marcus said softly, "these gentlemen have a proposition for you. A chance to expand your healing practice, to help many more people than our little village can offer." The pearls felt suddenly heavy against her throat, like tiny anchors pulling her down into depths she couldn't fathom. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. "The sea provides, daughter, but it also demands its due." The silver coins made no sound as they passed from merchant to elder, 30 pieces, wrapped in black velvet. Mira watched through a crack in the floorboards of Elder Marcus's study, her wrists already raw from the ropes binding them. She hadn't meant to see this final transaction, this weighing of her worth in metal and betrayal, but perhaps it was fitting that she should witness it. "The girl's father," one of the merchants asked, his accent thick with distant shores. "Away gathering herbs in the high mountains," Marcus replied, his familiar voice now hollow with shame. He won't return for several days. By then, he left the sentence unfinished, but its ending hung in the air like storm clouds on the horizon. They had come for her at dawn, after that first visit to Willem's cottage. Not with violence, they knew better than that. Instead, they spoke of a plague in a distant port, of hundreds dying without proper care. They needed a healer, they said. When trained in the old ways, the pay would be generous, the contract brief. Just 3 months of service, then home with enough gold to build a proper infirmary. Her father would have seen through their lies. But her father wasn't here, and Mira's heart had swelled with the thought of helping so many. She had packed her medicines, written a note explaining her departure. Only when the ship's crew seized her at the dock did she understand her fate. Now she knelt in the darkness beneath Marcus's feet, listening to the sound of her life being sold. The merchant captain spoke again, his words precise and practiced. The price is fair. She's young, educated in medicine. The buyers in the eastern ports pay well for such specialized skills. A pause, then Marcus's voice, thick with unshed tears. You promise she won't be harmed. Laughter, cold as deep water. Of course not. Damaged goods fetch poor prices. Now about the other candidates. You mentioned! Mira's stomach lurched. Other candidates. How many before her? How many after? The pearls at her throat seemed to pulse with her mother's warning. The sea demands its due. She tested her bonds again, feeling the hemp fibers stretch. One of the crew had tied them. Sailors were usually better with knots. If she could just... The floorboard creaked above her head. Get her ready, the captain ordered. We sail with the evening tide. Rough hands dragged her up from the cellar into the harsh light of day. The village square was empty, no witnesses to her shame, or perhaps to their own. The coins clinked in Marcus's purse as she was led past him, a discordant melody of corruption. It's for the good of the village, he whispered, not meeting her eyes. The traders threatened to boycott our port. We would all starve by winter's end. Look at me, Mira commanded, her voice steady despite her tears. Look at what you've done. Elder Marcus, remember my face. Remember it when you count those coins, when you tell my father why his daughter vanished. He flinched, and in that moment she saw the truth. This wouldn't save the village. Men like these merchants, once they found willing collaborators, never stopped demanding more. Next time it would be someone else's daughter, someone else's son. The coins would continue to flow, silver streams of shame polluting everything they touched. The ship loomed before her, a dark giant striding the waves. Its wooden flanks gleamed with fresh pitch, but Mira saw the rot beneath, in the crew's hollow eyes, in the captain's cruel smile, in the empty spaces where conscience should dwell. As they forced her up the gangplank, she caught one last glimpse of her village. The morning sun painted the familiar cottages in shades of gold. The fishing boats bobbed peacefully at their moorings, and smoke rose from chimneys where families shared their breakfast bread. All so normal, so unchanged, while her world crumbled like sandcastles at high tide. The pearls pressed against her throat, and with them came a final memory of her mother's voice. The sea provides, my daughter, but never forget, it also takes. And sometimes what it takes it transforms. Iron chains sang their bitter song in the darkness of the hold. Mira had learned their different voices over the past weeks. The deep groan of links straining against wood, the sharp click of shackles. Shifting with the ship's roll, the whispered scrape of rust forming in the salt air. They were her companions now, these metal bonds that bit into her flesh and tethered her to the curved ribs of the vessel. She wasn't alone in the hold, though sometimes she wished she were. There were others chained in the darkness. 7 souls, if her counting was correct. She couldn't see them clearly, but their breathing, their occasional whimpers, and their whispered prayers formed a chorus of misery that marked the passage of time more surely than the hidden sun. Tell us another story about healing, whispered Sarah, the youngest of their company. Barely 14, she had been taken from a fishing village 3 ports north of Mira's home. Tell us about the herbs that grow by the sea. Mira shifted, trying to find a position where the chains wouldn't cut quite so deeply. There's a flower, she began, her voice rough from thirst, "that grows in the salt spray between the rocks, blue as twilight, with leaves like tiny silver fish. If you crush its petals with seawater." "Quiet down there!" A boot stamped on the deck above, sending dust and splinters raining down, but Mira had learned to pitch her voice below the threshold of the guard's hearing, a skill as valuable as any healing lore. "The flower's essence," she continued softly, "draws poison from wounds. My mother taught me to find it by moonlight, when its petals glow like stars fallen to earth." The chains clinked as she moved, and for a moment their song seemed to harmonize with her words, creating a strange music in the dark. She still wore her pearl necklace. The captain had ordered it left on her, knowing its value would increase, her price at market. But its familiar weight had changed, become something darker. Each pearl now felt like a tear frozen in time, a small, hard reminder of everything that had been stolen from her. Days blurred together in the hold's eternal twilight. Twice daily the crew brought water and hard bread. Once a week they were allowed up on deck for air, though never all at once. Mira used these precious moments to study the ship, its crew, and most importantly, the sea. Something was different about the waters they sailed. The waves moved wrong, following patterns she had never seen in her years of watching her mother dive for pearls. Sometimes in the deepest part of night she felt vibrations through her chains, not from the ship's normal movement but something else, something below. "The rats are restless," observed Willem, a weathered sailor who had been pressed into service and then condemned to the hold for refusing brutal orders. "Never seen ship's rats act like this. They're afraid of something." He was right. The rodents that normally infested every vessel now clustered in the corners furthest from the hull, their tiny eyes reflecting what little light filtered down. They seemed to be listening for something, just as Mira found herself doing with increasing frequency. The chains that bound them to the ship had begun to rust far faster than they should, developing patterns that looked almost like script in some ancient tongue. Mira traced these markings with her fingers when she couldn't sleep, which was often. They felt warm to her touch, and sometimes she could swear they pulsed in time with the strange movements she sensed in the deep. "There are old stories," Willem whispered one night after the others had fallen into uneasy slumber, "about ships that sailed these waters and were never seen again. Not wrecked, not taken by pirates, just gone. The sea here has appetites, they say." Mira touched her pearls, thinking of her mother. Had she known these waters? Had she felt this same strange resonance with the depths? The chains shifted, and for a moment their song changed, becoming almost melodic. "Listen," she breathed, but Willem had already drifted off. She closed her eyes and focused on the sensation. The chain's song seemed to call to something far below, something vast and patient and very, very old. And sometimes, in those moments between sleeping and waking, she thought she heard it answer. The ship's timbers creaked around them, a sound she had initially taken for normal settling. But now she wasn't so sure. There was intention in those groans and whispers, as if the vessel itself was trying to speak, or perhaps something was speaking through it, reaching up from the lightless depths to touch the world above. Her chains grew warmer, and in the darkness she smiled. They thought these bonds held her, but with each passing day she understood more clearly. They were becoming something else entirely, not restraints, but conductors, not prison, but passage, not endings, but beginnings. The sea provides, her mother had said, but it also transforms. Captain's log, 16th of March. Something's wrong with the winds. Third day they've blown against every known pattern of these waters. Crew's getting nervous. That girl in the hold, the healer's daughter, I hear her, singing at night, songs that have no business being sung. The captain's quill paused above the leather-bound book, ink dripping onto the page like black blood. Outside his cabin window, the sky had turned the color of a fresh bruise. He drew another line. Cargo value no longer worth the risk. Eastern market prices won't cover the losses if... A knock interrupted his writing. "Enter," he barked, closing the log with trembling fingers. His first mate stepped in, bringing with him the smell of rain and fear. "Begging pardon, Captain Blackwood, but the men are asking questions. About the girl. What about her?" Blackwood's voice was sharp as a filleting knife. "They say she's cursed us. Say the chains in the hold. They're changing, making sounds no metal should make. And the rats, superstitious nonsense." But Blackwood's eyes strayed to his log, to the words he'd written about the winds. About the songs in the night. The storms had started the day after they'd taken her aboard. Small ones at first, barely worth noting in the ship's log, but they'd grown stronger, stranger. Waters calm as glass, one moment would erupt into choppy waves the next, with no wind to drive them. The compass needle spun wildly whenever they passed certain points, as if the magnetic north itself was dancing to some unheard melody. Last night he'd heard her voice floating up from the hold, a melody that made his teeth ache and his bones feel hollow. The words weren't in any language he knew, but they seemed to call to something in the deep, when he'd sent a man to silence. Her, the sailor had returned white-faced, claiming her chains were glowing like hot iron, though they left no burns on her skin. Captain's log, addendum, decision made. Can't risk full journey to eastern markets. Girl goes overboard at next bell. Better to lose one piece of cargo than the whole ship. Crew agrees. He blotted the page carefully, watching the ink dry into permanent testament. How many similar entries had he made over the years? How many problems had he solved with a few fathoms of seawater? Thunder growled overhead, and the ship's timbers answered with a groan that sounded almost like words. Blackwood found himself reading back through his log, through weeks of increasingly disturbed entries. 10th of March. Second mate claims he saw something following the ship, larger than any whale. 12th of March. Pearl necklace on the girl glows at night. Men won't go near her during feeding times. 13th of March. Found strange markings carved into the deck, not by human hands. Had them scraped away, but they returned by morning. A massive wave struck the ship broadside, sending the inkwell sliding across his desk. As Blackwood reached to catch it, he noticed his hands were shaking, the log's pages ruffled in a wind that shouldn't have been able to penetrate his sealed cabin. "Captain!" The first mate's voice again, panic now evident. "Storm's getting worse. Men are saying—" "I don't care what they're saying," Blackwood snarled, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the cabin windows where darkness pressed in like a living thing. "Prepare the girl. We do it now, before full dark." As his first mate hurried to comply, Blackwood made one final entry in his log. "God forgive me, but the sea will have its due." He didn't notice, as he closed the book, how the ink seemed to writhe on the page, how the letters shifted and changed when he wasn't looking directly at them. Didn't notice how they rearranged themselves into patterns that matched the strange markings appearing on his ship's deck, patterns that matched the rust script spreading across the chains in his hold. The storm gathered closer, and somewhere below his feet, Mira began to sing. They didn't bother removing her chains. The weight would help her sink, the captain said, his voice nearly lost in the storm's fury. Mira stood at the rail, rain painting her face with tears she refused to shed herself. The iron links hung heavy from her wrists, but they no longer felt like bonds. They had become something else, something alive with potential. Lightning split the sky, illuminating walls of water that seemed to reach toward the clouds themselves. The ship pitched violently, yet Mira kept her feet while hardened sailors stumbled. Her pearl necklace pulsed against her throat in time with the thunder, each bead growing warm with an inner light that only she could see. "Any last words, witch?" Captain Blackwood demanded, his face twisted with fear, poorly disguised as contempt. Mira smiled, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly despite the tempest. "The sea provides," she said, "but it also transforms." Then she stepped forward, before they could push her, and embraced the void. The fall lasted both moments and eternities. The storm-whipped surface rushed up to meet her, and then she was through, plunging into darkness that grew deeper with every heartbeat. The chains pulled her down, down, into pressures that should have crushed her, depths that should have killed her instantly. But something else was happening instead. She saw it then, a vast structure of ancient coral, rising from the lightless depths like a cathedral built by gods long forgotten. Its spires and arches glowed with a phosphorescence that pulsed in rhythm with her pearl necklace, with her very heartbeat. Patterns in the coral's surface matched exactly the rust script that had formed on her chains, and now she could read them. They spoke of change, of power, of prices paid and bargains struck in the days when the world was young. They spoke of others like her, betrayed, sacrificed, transformed. They spoke of justice that moved with the tides, of vengeance that crashed like waves upon rocky shores. The coral formation seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with the ocean's currents. As Mira drifted toward it, she saw movement within. Its chambers, shapes that defied description, beings that had once been human but had become something far more primal. They reached for her with limbs of light and shadow, singing in voices that could exist only in the crushing depths. Her lungs should have been burning, screaming for air, but instead they filled with something else: knowledge, power, purpose. The chains that had bound her dissolved into threads of living metal that wound through her flesh, becoming part of her. Her pearl necklace blazed like a string of stars, each bead a tiny sun illuminating the transformation. Within the coral's heart, she found what had been waiting for her all along, an entity vast as the ocean itself, ancient as the first tides that swept across a cooling world. It had worn many names through the ages, had been called goddess and monster and everything between. Now it offered her a choice. "You can end here," it whispered in a voice like waves lapping at midnight shores. "Find peace in the deep, let the waters take your pain." Or, Mira asked, her voice carrying perfectly in the impossible depths. "Or become something new, take my power, join with those who maintain the balance between land and sea, protect others from the fate you suffered. But know this, what you become, you remain. The transformation, once embraced, cannot be undone." Mira thought of her village, of Elder Marcus counting his silver coins, of other girls who might be sold, other lives that might be ruined, of her mother, who had understood more about the sea's true nature than she had ever revealed. "Will I forget who I was?" she asked. "You will remember everything, every joy, every pain, every moment that shaped you. They will be your anchor when the power threatens to sweep you away." The coral pulsed around them, its light growing stronger. Within its chambers, the transformed ones watched and waited. Some had been here for centuries, others for mere decades. All had made the same choice she faced now. "Show me," Mira said. The entity flowed into her like a tide, rushing to fill an empty harbor. Power coursed through her body, rewriting the very essence of what she was. Her eyes burned within a fire. Her flesh became something between water and light. The pearl necklace melted, each bead sinking into her throat to become part of her new form. Above, the storm raged on. She could feel the ship fighting against waves that now responded to her will, could sense the terror of the crew as they felt the change in the water around them. Dawn approached, though no light penetrated these depths. When she opened her eyes that now burned like twin flames in the darkness, she saw with more than mortal sight. The coral formation sang to her of ancient pacts and eternal purposes. The transformed ones bowed to their newest sister. She turned her gaze upward, toward the ship that had carried her to this destiny, toward the men who had thought to end her story, not knowing they were only beginning it. "Time to rise," she whispered, and the ocean answered with a roar. Dawn broke over a sea gone mirror smooth, the storm's fury suspended like a held breath. Captain Blackwood stood at the helm, watching the eastern horizon bleed red into the sky. The ship's ropes hung slack in the unnatural stillness, heavy with moisture that seemed reluctant to drip. "No sign of her body, sir," the first mate reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Current should have brought something up by now." Blackwood said nothing, his eyes fixed on the water's glassy surface. 30 years at sea had taught him every mood of the ocean, every trick of wind and wave. This silence, this waiting stillness, He had never seen its like. The first rope began to smoke at the bow, not the quick, eager flame of tar catching fire, but something else, a slow, underwater kind of burning that turned the hemp fibers to glowing threads without consuming them. A sailor reached to touch it and yanked his hand back with a cry. Where his fingers had brushed the rope, the skin blistered instantly. More ropes began to ignite with that strange, cold fire. The rigging came alive with serpentine lines of light, creating a web of luminescence that trapped the ship in its own ghostly reflection. Steam rose from the points where the burning ropes touched the deck, yet the wood didn't char. "Cut them! Loose!" Blackwood ordered, but no one moved. They all felt it, the change in the air, the charge building like lightning about to strike. She rose from the starboard side, water cascading from her form like liquid silver, where once had been. A girl in chains. Now stood something that only wore the memory of human shape. Her flesh rippled like moonlight on deep water, and her eyes, God above, her eyes burned like twin flames in the dawn light. The pearls that had adorned her neck were gone, replaced by points of phosphorescent light that pulsed beneath her skin. They matched the rhythm of the burning ropes, which now began to move of their own accord, sliding through their blocks and cleats like living things. "Impossible," Blackwood breathed. "We sent you to the depths. The depths sent me back." Her voice resonated with harmonics that set the ship's timbers humming. "Did you think the sea would simply take what you offered? That the waters would be complicit in your crimes?" She raised one hand, and the burning ropes responded, writhing like awakened serpents. They wrapped around the nearest sailor, the one who had brought her moldy bread in the hold, who had kicked her when she asked for water. He screamed as the otherworldly fire touched his skin, but the ropes didn't burn him. Instead, they pulled him to the rail and held him there, suspended over the waiting sea. "Please," he whimpered. "I was only following orders." "As was I," she replied, "following the orders of the deep." She turned her gaze to the rest of the crew, who huddled against the mainmast. "Each of you will face the judgment of the waters. Some may survive. Those whose hearts hold true remorse might even be transformed." Her smile held no warmth. The sea provides alternatives after all. The burning ropes continued their dance, reaching for more of the crew. Some tried to fight, to cut the animated hemp with their knives, but the blades passed through the glowing fibers without effect. Others fell to their knees, praying to gods who held no power here. Blackwood drew his pistol with shaking hands. "What manner of devil are you?" "Devil?" She laughed, and the sound rang across the water like bells in the deep. "No, I am something far older than your Christian hell. I am what comes when men forget that the sea is not their servant, but their judge." The ropes coiled around her like a living crown. "I am what happens when you chain someone to the heart of the ocean and expect the ocean not to notice." She moved across the deck, not walking, but flowing like a wave up a beach. The burning ropes followed her movement, their light growing stronger as the sun rose higher. Where they touched the ship's wood, strange patterns began to form, the same script she had seen in the coral cathedral below. "Now then, Captain," she said, stopping before him, "shall we discuss the contents of your log? All those other souls you've fed to the sea over the years." She reached out with one liquid light hand. "The depths have excellent memories, and they've been waiting for you for a very long time." The burning ropes began to sing. The ship's bell hung silent in the morning air, its bronze surface reflecting the strange light that emanated from Mira's transformed form. She remembered its harsh voice from her time in the hold, marking the watches, announcing meals she wasn't allowed to eat, tolling out the rhythm of her captivity. Now it called to her with different promises. She approached it slowly, the burning ropes still holding the crew in their fiery embrace. The bell's surface rippled at her touch, like water disturbed by a stone, and deep within its metal, she sensed an echo of the coral formation's song. "All ships carry bells," she mused, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crew flinch. "Did you never wonder why? Did you think it was merely tradition?" Her fingers traced patterns across the bronze, leaving trails of phosphorescence. They're meant to sing to the sea, to ask safe passage, but they can sing of other things too. With a gesture, she pulled the bell from its mounting. It floated before her, turning slowly in the air, its surface now alive with the same script that marked the deck. At her will, it began to toll, not the sharp, clean note of metal striking metal, but a deeper sound, as if the ocean itself was speaking through its voice. The waves responded immediately. They rose around the ship in perfect circles, each ring corresponding to a beat of the bell's song. The water moved wrong, defying natural patterns, creating geometries that shouldn't exist outside of dreams or nightmares. "Who shall we summon first?" she asked the trembling crew. "The spirits of those you've drowned? The ancient ones who sleep in the deep? Or perhaps," her smile held centuries of tide-worn secrets, "perhaps we should call those who were transformed before me. Would you like to meet your other victims?" The bell's song changed, becoming a harmony of voices that no human throat could produce. Shapes moved in the surrounding waves, humanoid, figures made of water and light, their eyes burning like Mira's own, the transformed ones answering their sister's call. "No!" Captain Blackwood stumbled back from the rail. "It's not possible. We sent them all to the depths, and the depths kept them," Mira replied. "Kept them, changed them, gave them purpose." She turned the bell with another gesture, and its song grew stronger. Each soul you thought to drown became something new, something that remembers. The figures in the waves drew closer, their features becoming clearer. Some wore the remnants of chains, others clutched phantom coins or carried ghostly logs of their own. All had been sacrificed to the sea's dark waters, and all had returned transformed. Willem, still chained in the hold below with the others, called up through the deck boards, "Mistress Mira, the chains, they're changing!" She smiled, remembering her own transformation. "Let them change you, Willem. Let them show you what the sea offers." The bell's song penetrated deep into the ship's belly, and she heard the other prisoners gasp as their bonds began to glow. The first mate broke free of the burning ropes with a desperate lunge, drawing his sword. Before he could take 2 steps, the bell's toll caught him, froze him mid-stride. Water began to seep from his eyes, his mouth, his very pores. "Please," he gurgled, "we didn't know." "But you knew enough," Mira countered. "Knew you were sending innocents to their deaths. Knew you were trading in human lives like cargo." The bell's song wrapped around him like a physical thing. The sea knows the difference between ignorance and malice. It judges accordingly. As if in response, the water flooding from his body began to glow with the same phosphorescence that marked Mira's transformed flesh. His eyes widened in terror or wonder, perhaps both, as he felt the change begin. The bell sang louder, calling to something vast that moved beneath the ship's keel. The wooden timbers groaned as ancient pressures worked upon them, reshaping them as surely as the sea had reshaped Mira herself. "The transformation has begun," she announced to the crew, her voice harmonizing with the bell's otherworldly music. "Some of you will become like me, guides and guardians of these waters. Others will face the justice of the deep." The bell spun faster, its song building toward some terrible crescendo. "The sea will know which of you deserves which fate." In the hold below, Willem began to sing, his voice already changed by the power flowing through his chains. The other prisoners joined him, their harmony matching the bell's eternal song. The transformation spread through the ship like a tide that could not be denied. The sun rose higher, but its light seemed pale and thin compared to the glow of ancient power that now suffused the vessel. Mira raised her hands, conducting an orchestra of rope and wood and bronze and flesh, while around them the sea danced to its own dark music. Captain Blackwood's sextant lay useless on his chart table, its brass arms twisted like seaweed in a current. The carefully calibrated instrument, which had guided the ship through countless voyages, now pointed only to impossible angles. Its mirrors reflected things that shouldn't be there, depths that couldn't exist, creatures that had no names in any mortal tongue. Mira lifted the device, watching quicksilver droplets of seawater roll across its surface. "You used this to chart your course through these waters," she said, her voice carrying the whisper of waves against a midnight shore. "To plan your routes of trade and treachery. Let's see what other paths it might reveal." The sextant hummed. In her transformed hands, its mechanisms reorganizing themselves like a puzzle box, solving itself. Where it had once measured the angles between stars and horizon, it now traced lines of power that ran deep beneath the waves. Ley lines older than humanity's first tentative ventures onto the sea. "Your charts lie," she told the captain, who stood rigid in the grip of burning ropes. "They show only the surface world, the thin skin of water that you mortals dare to travel. But the true paths—" She held up the sextant, now glowing with the same phosphorescence that marked her flesh. "These run much deeper." Through the sextant's transformed lenses, she saw the web of ancient currents that connected her coral cathedral to others like it, places of power where the sea's will manifested in stone and spirit. The trading routes that Blackwood had used to transport his human cargo now revealed themselves as something far older, highways of power that the ocean itself had carved into the earth's bones. "Look," she commanded, holding the sextant to his eye. "See the true map of your domain." He screamed at what he saw, not just the supernatural geometries of the deep, but the faces of every soul he had sacrificed to it. They swam through the sextant's vision like schools of ghostly fish, each one bearing the marks of their drowning and subsequent transformation. "Please," he begged. "I can't." "You will," she cut him off. "You will see them all. Every life you thought to end has become part of something greater." She turned the sextant's gaze to the crew, "As will you all, one way or another." The device's measurements now wrote themselves across the deck in lines of cold fire, coordinates that pointed to other ships, other captains who dealt in human cargo. Mira saw them all, a web of cruelty spread across the sea's surface like an oil slick. But beneath that web ran deeper currents, older powers that had waited centuries for someone to call them to account. 7 ships within a fortnight's sail, she read from the burning figures, all carrying souls in chains, all following routes that crossed the ancient paths. She smiled, and it was the smile of winter waves breaking against a rocky shore. "The sea has been patient, but that patience ends today." The sextant's arms spun of their own accord, pointing to the nearest vessel, a 3-master running heavy with human cargo, just 2 days' sail to the east. On its deck another bell waited to be awakened. In its hold, more chains waited to become conduits of transformation rather than instruments of bondage. "Set course," she commanded the transformed timbers of her ship. The sea's justice spreads like a tide, invisible, inevitable, impossible to resist. Around them the waves rose in perfect geometric patterns, defying natural laws to form corridors of power through which their vessel could now travel. The sextant blazed brighter, marking their path with coordinates that had nothing to do with latitude and longitude, and everything to do with vengeance and transformation. In the hold below, Willem and the others sang in voices that were becoming less human with each passing hour. Their song harmonized with the ship's bell, with the burning ropes, with the very pulse of the ocean itself. The sextant caught these harmonies and translated them into mathematics of revenge, precise calculations of justice long deferred. "Navigation is everything at sea," Mira told her captive captain. "The difference between life and death lies in knowing exactly where you are and where you're bound." The sextant's brass surfaces rippled like disturbed water under her touch. "You thought you knew these waters. Now let me show you their true nature." The device's final measurement wrote itself across the sky in letters of flame, a course set not by stars or sun, but by the weight of countless souls crying out for resurrection. The tablet rose from the depths like a memory surfacing from a dream, its surface encrusted with centuries of coral growth that flaked away at Mira's touch. Beneath the organic accumulation, symbols writhed across stone that was older than humanity's first hesitant ventures onto the waves. She hovered before it in water that should have crushed her human form, her transformed flesh glowing with the same phosphorescence that illuminated the ancient text. "There were others," she whispered, her voice carrying perfectly in the impossible depths. "So many others." The tablet's surface shifted under her gaze, its scripts rearranging themselves like schools of fish, responding to unseen currents. Stories, unfolded in patterns of light and shadow, tales of those who had come before her, who had undergone similar transformations in ages past. A Phoenician princess, betrayed and thrown to the waters by merchants who coveted her father's port. A slave woman cast overboard during a storm to lighten a Roman galley's load. A Chinese admiral's daughter, sacrificed to appease the sea dragons her father thought he could command. Each had been claimed by the deep, transformed by powers that had dwelt in the ocean since before the first creatures crawled onto land. "We are the tide's daughters," the tablet sang in a voice like waves wearing a waystone. "We are the sea's revenge." Mira traced the symbols with fingers that were becoming less solid with each passing hour. Her flesh rippled like moonlight on water, responding to the tablet's ancient power. The pearls that had once adorned her throat were now part of her transformed being, glowing beneath her skin like stars seen through deep water. "Show me," she commanded, and the tablet's surface erupted with new images. She saw vast networks of coral cathedrals, like the one that had transformed her, spread across the ocean floors in patterns that mapped to the coordinates her transformed sextant had revealed. Each was a nexus of power, a place where the boundary between human and elemental became permeable. Within their chambers, others like her waited, some newly transformed, others so ancient they had forgotten their mortal names. The tablet showed her their purposes, their powers, their limitations. They were not gods, these transformed ones, but neither were they bound by merely human constraints. They were instruments of the sea's will, guardians of an equilibrium far older than mankind's brief dominion over the waves. "Your kind builds ships," the tablet's voice continued, "thinking to master the waters. They draw maps and chart courses, never understanding that the sea has its own mappings, its own intentions." The symbols shifted again, showing vessels throughout history that had encountered the transformed ones. Some must be taught respect. Others must be given the choice you were given. Images of Willem and the other prisoners appeared, their transformation already progressing through the power in their chains. The tablet script wrapped around these visions like caressing tentacles, showing Mira how to guide them through the change, how to help them embrace their new existence without losing their essential selves. But darker images followed. Captain Blackwood and his crew, their faces contorted with greed and cruelty. The tablet showed her other such men throughout history, those who had used the sea's vastness to hide their crimes. For these, the transformation would be different, less a gift, more a judgment. "The depths, remember," the tablet whispered. "Every soul cast into darkness, every prayer spoken with water-filling lungs, every betrayal and every sacrifice, all are written in our memory." Mira saw herself as she now was, her transformed being a perfect fusion of human consciousness and elemental force. The tablet's surface rippled with approval, recognizing in her the same potential it had shown in others throughout the ages. "But choice remains," the stone voice reminded her. "Power without purpose is just another form of storm, destroying without discrimination. You must decide. Will you be merely vengeance, or will you be justice?" The symbols shifted one final time, showing her possibilities that branched like lightning across dark water. She could become a force of pure retribution, hunting down all who used the sea's paths for evil, or she could be something more subtle, a guardian who transformed those worthy of salvation while ensuring that those who dealt in human cargo met fates appropriate to their crimes. The tablet's surface stilled, waiting for her decision. In its ancient depths, Mira saw reflections of all who had faced this choice before her. Some had chosen pure vengeance and had eventually become as cruel as those they hunted. Others had found a balance, becoming something that sailors would both fear and honor, a force that punished the wicked but also protected those who respected the sea's ancient laws. Above, her transformed ship waited with its cargo of judgment and possibility. The tablet's wisdom settled into her being like sediment, sinking through still water, becoming part of whatever she was now becoming. "Show me how to be both," she told the ancient stone. "Both justice and vengeance, both mercy and retribution." The tablet's script began to glow with new purpose, and Mira's education in the deep magic truly began. The ship's compass spun wildly, in its brass housing, its needle whirling like a dancer gone mad. Once the pride of Captain Blackwood's navigation tools, it now registered magnetic forces that had nothing to do with Earth's natural poles. Each revolution left traces of phosphorescent light on the glass, creating patterns that matched the ancient tablet's script. "North means nothing here," Mira told the gathered crew, her transformed voice harmonizing with the compass's crystalline hum. "Your moral compass failed long ago. Why should this one serve you better?" The men had gathered on the foredeck, clutching weapons that seemed pathetically mundane against her otherworldly presence. Pistols loaded with lead that could never harm her water-light flesh. Swords that would pass through her like waves through fog. Even holy water, brought forth by the ship's cook who had once been a priest, though his faith, like his compass, had lost its true north years ago. "We won't be ruled by a demon from the deep," the first mate declared, his voice cracking on the last word. "Better to die fighting than submit to—" "Submit!" Mira laughed, and the sound rang across the waves like bells drowning in the abyss. "You think this is about submission?" The compass housing cracked, its needle now pointing directly at her heart. "This is about recognition, about facing what you truly are." The broken compass rose from its mounting, spinning in the air before her. In its shattered glass, each crew member saw their own reflection, not as they were now, but as they had been before greed and cruelty had twisted them. Young faces, innocent faces, full of dreams that had somehow led them to this dark path. "Look," she commanded, "look at what you've lost." Some tried to turn away, but the compass's power held them transfixed. In its splintered surface, they saw every choice that had led them here, every time they had ignored a prisoner's pleas, every coin they had accepted for human cargo, every moral compromise that had seemed so small at the time. Now, the first mate screamed, and the attack began. They came at her from all sides, desperate men making their final stand. But the sea itself rose to defend its daughter, walls of water deflecting bullets, waves washing weapons from hands. The broken compass spun faster, each revolution marking another failed assault. "Your direction was lost long before I broke your compass," Mira said, almost gentle now. "Each of you had a choice. Every time you set sail, each of you chose this." Her path, the compass shattered completely, its pieces hanging in the air like frozen rain. In each fragment, a different memory played. Moments when these men could have chosen differently, could have refused to participate in the trade of human lives, could have maintained their humanity instead of becoming monsters who chained people. In dark holds, "Please," one of the younger sailors begged, dropping his knife. "We didn't know what we were becoming." "But you did," Mira countered, the compass shards swirling around her like a constellation of guilt. "Each of you knew. You simply chose not to look at your own reflection." The fragments began to glow with the same inner light that marked her transformed flesh. They shot toward the crew like arrows of truth, each finding its target not in flesh, but in soul. Where they struck, men fell to their knees, their own transformations beginning. But these were not the gentle changes that Willem and the other prisoners were experiencing below. "Your compass led you to darkness," Mira pronounced. "Let the darkness have you." The first mate made one final lunge at her, an enchanted dagger raised high. The broken compass pieces converged, forming a mirror of perfect truth before him. What he saw in its surface broke him completely. Every life he had helped destroy, every soul he had helped condemn, all reflected back at him in endless recursion. He screamed, a sound that started human but ended as something else entirely. Water began to seep from his eyes, his mouth, his very pores. But unlike Willem's transformation below, this change held no promise of redemption. The water that claimed him was dark, thick with the guilt of his crimes. As the crew succumbed one by one to the compass's judgment, Mira felt the ship itself responding. The wooden planks beneath her feet softened, becoming something between matter and memory. The masts swayed like seaweed in a current that had nothing to do with wind. "Your moral compass broke long ago," she told the transforming men. "Now let the sea's truth guide you to what you truly deserve." The compass shards sang a harmony older than magnetic north, older than humanity's first attempts to navigate the trackless seas. It was the song of consequence, of justice long deferred but finally delivered. Above them, the ship's bell began to toll, counting out the measures of their transformation. The barnacles began their march across the ship's hull at midnight, their calcium shells glowing with the same phosphorescence that marked Mira's transformed flesh. But these were not ordinary crustaceans clinging to dead wood. These were something else entirely. Each tiny shell housed a memory, a fragment of every dark deed committed aboard this vessel. As they spread, the ship's timber softened, becoming something between wood and flesh, between matter and memory. "Listen," Mira commanded the transformed crew, their bodies now more water than flesh. "Listen to the song of your sins." The barnacles hummed as they grew, each cluster forming patterns that matched the tablet's ancient script. They told stories in calcium and brine, tales of every soul that had suffered in the hold, every life traded for silver, every prayer spoken in darkness. The ship's wood absorbed these memories, transforming with each revelation. "The vessel remembers," she said, running liquid fingers across the living hull. Every creak of chain, every muffled cry, every drop of blood spilled on these boards, all of it recorded in shell and bone. The barnacles reached the cargo hold, where Willem and the other prisoners continued their gentler transformation. As the living shells touched their chains, new songs emerged, hymns of liberation rather than imprisonment. The metal bonds became conduits of change, channeling power from the deep into worthy vessels. "See how differently it accepts you," Mira told them, her voice carrying through wood that was rapidly becoming more nerve than fiber. "The ship knows its true children." Above deck, the transformed crew writhed in their new forms, their bodies caught between states of being. The barnacles showed them no mercy, each cluster forcing them to relive the memories of their victims. Captain Blackwood screamed as shells erupted from his flesh, each one containing the face of someone he had condemned to the depths. The main mast shuddered and began to bend, not breaking but flexing like a tentacle. Rigging dissolved and reformed as strands of living tissue, sails became membranes that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The ship was becoming a creature in its own right, guided by the collective consciousness stored in millions of tiny, singing shells. "I've seen this before," the tablet's voice whispered in Mira's mind. "In ages past, when other vessels were judged worthy of transformation. The barnacles are the sea's record keepers, its living library of justice." The ship's bell, now encrusted with its own colony of memory shells, tolled a deeper note. The sound rippled through the vessel's transforming body, causing the barnacles to flare with increased light. Each tiny shell was a lens, focusing the power of the deep into the ship's metamorphosis. "Your hull bore witness," Mira addressed the changing vessel. "Now let it bear judgment." The bowsprit twisted toward the sky, its tip splitting into feelers that tasted the air for the scent of other slave ships. The barnacles sang louder, their light pulsing in patterns that matched the sextant's mysterious coordinates. This was no longer a mere vessel, but a hunting creature, born of human sin and oceanic justice. In the hold, Willem emerged from his chrysalis of chains and shells, his new form graceful with transformed purpose. "We feel it," he said, his voice harmonizing with the barnacle's song. "The ship, it's becoming like us, part of the sea's will." "Yes," Mira agreed. "As am I, as are all who accept the deep's judgment with true remorse." The captain made one final attempt at resistance, trying to scrape the living shells from his corrupted flesh, but the barnacles had already burrowed too deep, had already witnessed too much. They pulled him into their collective memory, showing him the true weight of his crimes through countless tiny windows into the past. "Please," he begged, his voice barely human now, "make it stop." "They can't stop," Mira told him. "Memory never stops. The sea never forgets. The barnacles are its archivists, its witnesses, its judges. They will sing your deeds until time itself ends." The ship's transformation accelerated as moon rose. Wood became cartilage, rope became nerve, sail became fin and membrane. The barnacles spread their song through every fiber, every cell, every molecule of the vessel's being. This was no longer a thing of human craft, but a creature of the deeps. Design, a hybrid of justice and vengeance, of memory and transformation. Mira felt the change complete itself, felt the ship's new consciousness mesh with her own. Through the barnacle's countless eyes, she saw the waves differently now, not as barriers, but as highways, not as wilderness, but as kingdoms. Other ships plied these waters, other captains traded in human cargo. The barnacles sang their locations, their crimes, their eventual judgments. "We are ready," the ship communicated through patterns of phosphorescent light. "We are transformed. We are justice." Mira smiled, her water-light form pulsing in harmony with the living hull. The barnacles had made the vessel into something new, not just a ship that could hunt slavers, but a testament to the sea's endless memory. Every shell was an archive, every cluster a chronicle of crimes that would never be forgotten. The hunt could truly begin. The black flag unfurled at the mainmast like a wound in the sky, its fabric drinking in light rather than reflecting it. No skull and crossbones marked this banner. Instead, living patterns of phosphorescence traced ancient scripts across its surface, telling tales of judgment and transformation in languages older than human memory. Mira watched it ripple in winds that had nothing to do with natural weather. Through the flag's dark expanse, she could see them coming, other vessels transformed as hers had been, drawn to her call like moths to a drowning flame. Their own flags responded to hers, a conversation of darkness and light playing out above. "The waves. 3 more approach from the east," Willem reported, his transformed voice harmonizing with the flag's low hum. "Slave ships we turned last week. Their crews have completed the change." The flag's surface rippled with recognition. In its folds, Mira saw the stories of these ships, their crimes, their judgments, their metamorphoses. Like her own vessel, they had become hybrid things, neither fully ship nor fully creature. Their hulls writhed with living barnacles, their masts twisted like tentacles testing the air, their forms shifting between wood and flesh and memory. "Show me their marks," she commanded the flag. The dark fabric blazed with sudden light, revealing sigils of power that identified each transformed vessel. One had been a Portuguese slave galleon before the sea claimed it. Another had been a Dutch merchant ship with a secret cargo of chains and misery. The third had been a pirate vessel that preyed on refugee boats. All had been judged, all had been changed. "Your banner calls them," the tablet's voice whispered in her mind, as others called to their own kind in ages past. The flag is both signal and symbol, a reminder that the sea's justice spreads like ink in water. More ships appeared on the horizon, their forms twisted by transformation. Some bore the marks of recent change, their hulls still settling into new configurations. Others were ancient, so long transformed that barnacles had become bone and sail had become scale. All answered the black flag's silent summons. "They follow the old paths," Mira observed, watching their approaches through the flag's mysterious vision. "The routes your sextant revealed." The flag's Surface became a map of these supernatural highways, currents of power that ran deeper than any mortal chart could show. Along these paths, her growing fleet could travel faster than natural ships, could sense the movements of those who still dared to trade in human cargo. Each vessel that joined them brought new songs to the harmony. The ship's bell tolled in greeting, the barnacles glowed in recognition, and the flag absorbed their stories into its ever-changing surface. Through it all, Mira felt her power growing, not just her own transformation deepening, but her connection to this fleet of justice strengthening. "The Portuguese captain," Willem said, indicating the nearest transformed ship. "He asks if you are the one from the prophecy, the one the tablet spoke of." Mira turned her waterlight gaze to the flag. In its depths, she saw more than just the gathered fleet. She saw possibilities spreading like cracks in glass, future transformations, future judgments, future chances for both vengeance and redemption. "Tell him I am whatever the sea requires," she replied. "As are we all." The flag snapped in a wind that carried the weight of centuries. Its darkness now held hints of other colors, deep blues that spoke of crushing depths, greens that whispered of coral gardens, and phosphorescent whites that reminded all who saw it of transformed flesh and ancient power. More ships appeared, called by the flag's silent voice. Some bore transformed crews who had willingly embraced the sea's judgment. Others carried the twisted forms of those who had resisted change and paid the price. All recognized the authority of Mira's banner, understanding that it represented not just her will, but the will of the ocean itself. "The fleet gathers," she announced to her transformed crew. "The sea's justice will no longer be confined to scattered acts of vengeance. We are becoming something more." The flag grew darker still, drinking in even the starlight, but in its depths, points of light began to move like schools of luminescent fish, forming patterns that spoke of coordination, of purpose, of power gathered and focused to a single end. The hunt was no longer a solitary pursuit. It had become a crusade, written on dark fabric with letters of light and memory. Above them all, the black flag wrote their story on the night sky, a declaration of purpose that mortal eyes could never fully comprehend. The sea's justice had raised its banner. The time of judgment had truly begun. The village elder's ring gleamed dully in the morning mist, its gold surface stained with green verdigris from its time in the depths. Mira had found it exactly where she knew it would be, in the belly of a shark that had fed on Marcus's hand when he tried to escape. Her justice, now she held it above the water's surface, letting its corrupted metal catch the dawn light. Her transformed fleet anchored in the familiar cove, their twisted forms casting shadows that writhed across the village's stone quays. The fishing boats had fled at their approach, their crews crossing themselves at the sight of vessels that defied natural law. Only the village itself remained, huddled against the shoreline like a child awaiting punishment. "They rebuilt the dock," Willem observed from beside her, his waterlight form rippling with remembered pain. "The same dock where they sold us." The ring pulsed in Mira's grip, each heartbeat of light revealing memories trapped in its metal. She saw them all now, every transaction, every betrayal, every coin that had passed from merchant to elder. The ring had witnessed them all, a conspirator in gold and corruption. "Come out, Marcus!" she called, her voice carrying impossible harmonics across the water. "Come and reclaim your symbol of authority." They emerged slowly from their houses. The village elders, the witnesses, the conspirators. Some she recognized, though her transformed vision saw through their flesh to the guilt that stained their souls. Marcus led them, his mutilated hand clutched to his chest, his face gray with recognition and fear. "You're dead," he whispered. "We heard. The captain sent word that I was given to the sea." Mira's laugh sent waves rippling outward in geometric patterns. "I was. And the sea gave me purpose." She held up the ring. "As it will give you truth." The ring rose from her palm, expanding impossibly until it formed a circle of light above the village square. Within its circumference, images began to play, every victim the elders had sold, every life they had condemned to the chains. Parents saw their missing children, children saw their lost parents. All witnessed the true cost of the village's prosperity. "Mercy," Marcus pleaded, falling to his knees. "We didn't know, but you did," Mira cut him off. "The ring remembers. Gold holds memories better than any other metal. Shall I show them what else it recalls?" The ring's circle blazed brighter, and now it showed the counting of coins, the secret meetings, the careful calculations of profit against human misery. It showed Marcus and the other elders teaching their successors how to evaluate which villagers would not be missed, which families were too weak to seek vengeance. "My father," Mira said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Did he ever return?" From the mountains?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. The ring showed that truth too, the carefully planned accident that had befallen the village's healer when he came too close to discovering their trade. The transformed fleet's bells began to toll, a harmony of judgment that set the very air trembling. From their twisted decks, other victims of the trade watched. Souls who had been sold from other villages, other ports, all now part of the sea's justice. "What will you do to us?" one of the younger elders asked, his voice shaking. Mira considered. The ring still spinning its tales of corruption above the square. "That depends," she said, "on how you answer this moment. Some of you knew, but stayed silent. Others actively participated. The ring knows the difference, as does the sea." She gestured, and seawater began to seep up through the cobblestones, forming pools that reflected not the sky above, but the depths below. In each pool, transformations waited, some gentle, others far less so. "Choose," she commanded. "Choose to face the sea's judgment willingly, or have it forced upon you. The ring will witness your choice, as it witnessed your crimes." Marcus looked at his maimed hand, then at the ring that had once adorned it. "And if we choose judgment, then you join us. You help us hunt others who trade in human lives. You become part of the sea's justice." Mira's smile held no warmth. "Or you become part of its vengeance. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. The tide turns soon." The ring's light touched each elder in turn, revealing their thoughts, their fears, their capacity for redemption or their dedication to corruption. Some stepped forward immediately, accepting transformation. Others tried to flee, only to find the waters rising to meet them. "The ring will record this too," Mira told them as the changes began. "It will remember who chose justice and who had justice chosen for them. In time, it will become part of the tablet's history, another chapter. In the sea's long memory, above them, the black flag rippled with approval, its patterns reflecting in the ring's golden surface. The village would never again be what it had been, but then neither would its people. The ring spun one final time, recording the moment, when justice returned home, deep beneath the waves, in the cathedral of living coral, where her transformation had begun. Mira's heart still beat. Not the water-light essence that now comprised her transformed being, but her original human heart, preserved in a chamber of crystalline salt, still pulsing with mortal rhythm. The tablet had shown her this place, this anchor to her former self, though she hadn't understood its purpose until now. "Every choice has a cost," the heart seemed to whisper, its beat sending ripples through the phosphorescent water. "Every transformation leaves something behind." She hovered before it, watching the organ's steady contractions. Within its chambers, memories still flowed like blood. Her father's gentle hands teaching her to grind medicines, her mother's voice singing old songs of the sea, the weight of her pearl necklace against her throat. Human memories growing more distant with each passing day. "You're becoming too much like the deep," Willem's voice carried through the water, concern rippling through his transformed flesh. "The fleet whispers that you haven't surfaced in days." Mira turned to face him, her form now so changed that light seemed to pass through her rather than reflect from her surface. "The depths call louder than before," she admitted, Sometimes I forget why we started this crusade. Sometimes all I remember is the hunt, the judgment, the power." Her heart pulsed stronger, as if in protest. In its crystalline chamber, she saw reflections of every transformation she had ordained, both the merciful and the merciless. The coral around them hummed with ancient harmonies, but beneath those songs, her heart kept its human rhythm. "Your father was a healer," Willem reminded her. "You were a healer too before they chained me in the dark." Her laugh sent schools of luminescent fish scattering. "Before they taught me that some wounds can only be answered with warfare." But her heart beat, unsteady as a chapel bell. Each pulse reminded her of patience healed, of thanks given, of the joy found in mending rather than breaking. The coral cathedral's spires rose around them like frozen music, their patterns matching the script that had taught her both vengeance and mercy. "The tablet speaks of others," she said slowly, watching her heart's shadows dance across the coral walls. "Others who went too far, who forgot their human purpose. They became like storms, like whirlpools, forces of pure destruction that had to be contained by their own kind." Her heart's chamber pulsed with brighter light, showing her these cautionary tales. Transformed ones who had surrendered completely to the deep's power, forgetting the human judgment that was supposed to guide it. They had become mindless engines of vengeance, eventually turning even on those they had once sought to protect. "The sea's power is infinite," Willem agreed, "but human hearts are meant to direct it. That's what makes us different from mere forces of nature. We choose, we judge, we remember why we fight." Mira pressed her transformed hand against the crystalline chamber. Through its salt glass walls, she felt her heart's warmth, the last truly human part of her being. The tablet had insisted she preserve it, not as a weakness to be protected, but as wisdom to be consulted. "Sometimes I dream of letting go completely," she confessed, "of becoming one with the depths, of surrendering this last piece of mortality. The power calls, Willem. It promises such terrible freedom." Her heart's beat strengthened, each pulse now illuminating the coral cathedral with memories. She saw herself through its human eyes, not as a force of supernatural vengeance, but as someone who had been wronged and sought to prevent others from suffering the same fate. The perspective shifted something inside her transformed consciousness. "Your father taught you that healing sometimes requires courage," Willem said softly, "that preventing harm is as important as mending wounds." The heart's rhythm synchronized with the coral's song, creating a harmony between human purpose and oceanic power. In that resonance, Mira felt herself finding a new balance, not a choice between humanity and transformation, but a fusion of both. "The sea transforms," she quoted her mother's words, "but it doesn't have to erase." Her heart blazed with approval, its light touching every corner of the coral cathedral. The crystalline chamber seemed to sing, reminding her that she had been chosen not despite her humanity, but because of it. The sea's justice needed human hearts to guide it, human memories to give it purpose. "We surface with the dawn," she decided, feeling her heart's rhythm steady her resolve. "There are still those who need our judgment, but they deserve to see the human eyes behind it. To understand that their crimes are measured by human hearts, even if their punishment comes from the deep." The heart's chamber pulsed one final time, blessing her choice with its mortal wisdom. In its beat, she heard the future's rhythm, a melody of power tempered by purpose, of vengeance guided by memory, of justice measured by a human heart. The storm crown materialized above Mira's transformed form, a circlet of living lightning and water-dark power. Not metal, but pure energy shaped by will and memory, its points rising like waves frozen at their cresting moment. Within each peak, storms raged in miniature, each containing the fury of a different transformation she had witnessed or ordained. Captain Blackwood knelt before her on the deck of what had once been his ship, his partially transformed body caught between states of being. Water and darkness leaked from his flesh, but unlike Willem and the others who had embraced their change, his transformation had stalled, trapped by his own resistance, his inability to accept the sea's judgment. "You still don't understand," Mira said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the barnacle-encrusted deck shiver. "Even now, facing the consequences of your choices, you cling to what you were." The storm crown flared, and in its lightning-lit facets, images played like reflections in troubled water. Every soul Blackwood had condemned to the depths, every life he had traded for gold, every crime recorded in his captain's log, all now displayed in terrible clarity. "I was following the trade routes," he protested, his words gurgling through lips that kept trying to dissolve into spray. "Everyone knew, everyone participated, and all will face judgment," Mira agreed. The crown's light intensified, showing glimpses of her transformed fleet spreading across the world's oceans, hunting others of his kind. "But you were among the first. You taught others that profit was worth more than human life. Your example spread like poison through these waters." Around them, the ship's transformed structure groaned with remembered pain. The living barnacles sang their chorus of accusation, each tiny shell containing a different memory of cruelty. The burning ropes twisted overhead like auroras, and the ship's bell tolled a deeper note that seemed to come from the ocean floor itself. "The crown shows truth," Mira continued, watching him try to look away from its revelations. "Not just what you did, but what you knew you were doing. Every moment you could have chosen differently. Every time you heard the prisoners weep and hardened your heart instead of showing mercy." Lightning arced between the crown's points, and with each flash, Blackwood's resistance weakened. His flesh became more water than matter, but instead of the luminescent beauty that marked Willem and the other redeemed ones, his transformation turned him dark and turbid. "Please," he begged, reaching toward her with hands that kept losing their shape. "I can change. I can help you hunt the others." The storm crown's light caught his words, testing them against the truth in his heart. In its depths, Mira saw the lie, saw him already planning to escape, to find some way to twist this power to his own ends. Even now, facing judgment, he could not surrender his greed. "The crown knows," she said softly, "as does the sea, as do I." She raised her hands, and the crown's power built like a gathering storm. "You had your chance to change when you first threw me into the deep. Instead, you taught me that some souls cannot be transformed, only unmade." The crown unleashed its full fury. Lightning struck Blackwood from every point, not destroying his flesh, but revealing its true nature. In the crown's merciless light, his soul became visible, a dark, twisted thing that had forgotten how to be human long before the sea claimed him. "No more cells of darkness," Mira pronounced, as his screams echoed across the waves. "No more chains in the hold, no more counting coins while children weep. The crown shows you as you are, and what you are can no longer exist in these waters." The transformation completed itself in moments. Where Blackwood had knelt, only a dark stain remained, seeping between the deckboards to join the depths from which he had harvested so much suffering. The crown's light dimmed, though its storms continued to rage in miniature, ready to pass judgment on others who would follow in his wake. Willem emerged from the transformed bowsprit, his luminescent form bright against the night sky. "The fleet awaits your word," he said. "The crown's light is visible for leagues. Others of his kind will see it and know their time has come." Mira nodded, feeling the weight of power and purpose the crown represented. It was no mere symbol of authority, but a manifestation of the sea's will guided by human judgment. Her preserved heart, deep in its coral chamber, beat in time with the crown's lightning pulses. "Signal the fleet," she commanded. "The crown has shown us our next hunting grounds. Let Blackwood's fate serve as both warning and promise. Those who would trade in human misery will find these waters no longer safe for their passage." The storm crown blazed once more, its light touching the darkness where Blackwood had dissolved. Not in vengeance now, but in certainty. The certainty of natural law, of consequence, of justice, served not in anger, but in necessity. The hunt would continue, but never again would it be personal. The crown had transformed her quest from revenge to something larger, something that belonged not to her alone, but to the sea itself. The sea chart unfurled across the waves like a living thing, its surface neither paper nor parchment, but pure light given form. Where traditional maps showed fixed coastlines and measured depths, this supernatural cartography revealed the ocean's true nature, ever-changing paths of power, corridors of transformation, and safe harbors for those who sought escape from human cruelty. The old routes are changing, Mira observed, her transformed fingers tracing lines of light that shifted like currents. The slavers try to find new paths, but the chart reveals their every movement. The map's surface rippled with information, showing ships attempting to hide their dark commerce behind legitimate trade. But to the chart's enlightened vision, their true purpose blazed like beacon fires. Every vessel that carried human cargo left traces in the water, ripples of pain and fear that the chart translated into precise coordinates. "Here," Willem said, pointing to a cluster of light points off the African coast. "They've established new ports, thinking themselves beyond our reach." The chart's illumination intensified around that area, revealing layers of information that no mortal map could contain. Mira saw not just the physical geography, but the spiritual topology of those waters, the ancient powers that dwelt there, the potential for transformation, the judgment that waited to be unleashed. "The chart shows us more than their locations," she said, watching patterns emerge in the living map. "It shows us possibilities. See these lines?" She indicated streams of softer light that wound between the slave routes. "Escape paths. Safe. Passages that we can reveal to those who help others flee." The chart responded to her understanding, its surface blooming with new information. Hidden coves where transformed ships could wait to intercept slavers, deeper channels where ancient powers could be awakened to aid their cause, sanctuaries where those rescued could be given the choice of transformation or return to shore. "We're creating new maps," Willem realized, his luminescent form pulsing with excitement. "Not just hunting the wicked, but building networks of salvation." Mira nodded, feeling her preserved heart beat in harmony with the chart's pulsing light. This was what she had been moving toward since her own transformation. Not just vengeance, but reconstruction. Not just punishment, but protection. The chart expanded, covering more of the sea's surface. Points of light marked the locations of other transformed ones, some from her own fleet, others far older, awakened from long slumber by the changes she had set in motion. They formed a web of power and purpose, each connected to the others by lines of force that the chart revealed in shimmering detail. "The tablet spoke of this," she said, remembering ancient wisdom, a time when the seas' justice would become systematic rather than scattered, when those who were transformed would work in concert rather than alone. New marks appeared on the chart's surface, symbols that matched the script on her coral cathedral, the patterns in her storm crown, the songs of her barnacles. They showed places where the boundary between human and elemental was thinnest, where transformation could be offered as salvation rather than imposed as punishment. "Show me the next convergence," she commanded the chart. Its surface shifted like tide patterns, rearranging themselves, revealing a point where multiple slave routes intersected. But now she saw more than just the paths of the wicked. She saw opportunities for redemption, chances to transform the trades themselves, rather than simply destroying those who practiced them. "The merchants who carry slaves," Willem said thoughtfully, "they have families in port cities, children who might choose different paths if shown the truth." The chart brightened at his words, adding new layers of meaning to its display. Bloodlines and inheritance patterns appeared as delicate traceries of light, showing how the trade of human cargo passed from generation to generation. But it also showed points where that chain could be broken, where education and revelation might accomplish what violence could not. "We'll still hunt those who refuse to change," Mira declared, watching the chart record her words in patterns of light and shadow. "But now we can do more. We can reshape the very waters they sail, make them unsuitable for their dark commerce." The chart's surface rippled with approval, showing how such changes could spread across the world's oceans. Safe harbors could be linked by underwater currents that no normal ship could navigate. Hidden passages could be opened for those fleeing bondage. The very geography of maritime trade could be altered to reject those who dealt in human lives. The chart isn't just showing us the sea as it is, Willem realized. It's showing us the sea as it could be, as we could make it. Mira smiled, her water-light form resonating with the chart's illumination. Yes, we're not just transformed ourselves, we're transforming the waters themselves, making them hostile to cruelty and welcoming to justice. The living map continued to evolve beneath their gaze, each new pattern suggesting possibilities that bridged the human and elemental worlds. It was more than a tool for navigation now. It was a blueprint for reformation, a guide to reshaping the very nature of maritime power. The chart's light touched the horizon, promising dawn in more ways than one. Dawn's light broke across the waves, not as ordinary sunrise, but as something transformed. Just as Mira herself had been transformed, the light became a living thing, a bridge between air and water, between human understanding and oceanic power. In its rays, both worlds became visible simultaneously, the surface realm of ships and trade, and the deeper realm of ancient powers and eternal tides. Mira stood at the junction of these worlds, her form shifting between states as the special dawn illuminated her. Sometimes she was almost human again, the ghost of her pearl necklace visible at her throat. Other times, she was pure power, a being of water and light shaped by memory and purpose. The dawn's radiance revealed both as true, both as necessary. The light shows us as we are, Willem said, watching his own transformed flesh ripple with renewed luminescence. Not what we were or what we've become, but what we've chosen to be. Around them their fleet rode the morning swells, each vessel caught in the dawn's revealing rays. The ships were no longer merely transformed, but transcendent, living bridges between the world of human commerce and the deep's eternal laws. Their hulls gleamed with barnacle script that caught the special light and transformed it into messages of warning and welcome. When I first changed, Mira said, letting the dawn's radiance flow through her like a tide, I thought power was the answer, that enough force, enough vengeance would cleanse these waters. She smiled as her preserved heart, deep in its coral chamber, beat in rhythm with the waves. But the dawn shows us a different truth. The light seemed to agree, splitting into spectrums that no human eye could see. In these new colors, Mira watched the sea's true nature reveal itself. Power flowed, not just in currents of water, but in currents of choice and consequence. The dawn illuminated paths of possibility, ways to transform not just individuals, but the very relationships between human and oceanic worlds. The storm crown above her head caught the light and refracted it, creating patterns that matched the sea chart's living maps. But where before these patterns had shown mostly paths of judgment and pursuit, now they revealed something more complex, networks of transformation and redemption, ways to preserve what was worthy in human commerce, while excising what was cruel. We're not just guardians, Willem realized, watching the dawn paint new meanings across the waves. We're mediators, between surface and deep, between human law and ocean's justice. Mira nodded, feeling the truth of it resonate through her. Transformed being, the dawn's light showed her memories of what she had been, a healer's daughter, trained to mend what was broken. That purpose hadn't been lost in her. Transformation. It had evolved, expanded to encompass larger wounds, deeper healings. The first merchant ship of the morning appeared on the horizon, its captain clearly uncertain at the sight of Mira's transformed fleet. But the dawn's special light revealed the vessel's nature instantly, a honest trader, carrying spices and textiles, its crew free men who shared fairly in the profits. Mira raised her hand, and the dawn light condensed into a signal that all surface ships would soon learn to recognize. Safe passage granted, no inspection needed. The merchant ship sailed on, its crew crossing themselves but no longer in fear, in recognition of a new power that protected honest commerce while punishing those who traded in human misery. "The light changes everything," she said softly, "not by destroying what was, but by showing what could be." The dawn's radiance caught her words and amplified them, sending messages across the waves in patterns of illumination that both natural and transformed ships would learn to read. Here was sanctuary, here was judgment, here was the possibility of change, all written in light across the morning sea. Her fleet began to move, each vessel turning to its assigned waters. Some would hunt those who still dared to trade in slaves. Others would guard the safe passages that the sea chart had revealed. Still others would wait in transformed harbors, ready to offer escape to those fleeing bondage and transformation, to those worthy of the sea's embrace. The dawn light followed them all, marking their passages with new colors that would become known in every port. The colors of justice tempered by mercy, of power guided by purpose, of vengeance transformed into protection. Mira felt her heart beat once more in its coral chamber, not with the rhythm of revenge now, but with the steady pulse of guardianship. The light showed her what she had truly become, not just an agent of the sea's justice, but a bridge between worlds, a healer of the greatest divide. The dawn's illumination spread across the waters like a promise, and Mira sailed with it into waters that were no longer dark.